Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling a topic. I know a lot of you are really interested in mental health.
It's such an important one.
It really is. And judging by the stack of articles you've all sent in, we've got excerpts from the National Institute of Mental Health, some really insightful pieces from Healthline, even a report from the World Health Organization to give us that global perspective. You don't just want the basics right.
Sounds like someone's ready to go deep.
You got it. You want to understand the nuances of mental health, how it can look different for everyone, and most importantly, how to take better care of your own well-being. Am I on the right track?
Absolutely. And you picked the perfect time to dive in, too, because mental health is finally getting the attention it deserves.
It really is. Okay, so one thing that jumped out at me from the NIMH, they define mental health as more than just the absence of illness. It's about really thriving, not just surviving, but flourishing. Did that resonate with you?
100%. It's like we often wait until things are really tough before we even think about our mental well-being. But what if, instead of just putting on a Band-Aid when things get rough, we focused on building a solid foundation of good mental health?
Yes. It's like taking your mental health for a daily walk in the sunshine instead of just waiting until you get rained on to find an umbrella.
I love that analogy. And the World Health Organization, they highlight something really interesting here. They talk about mental health as existing on a spectrum and being influenced by so many factors, not just what's going on in our individual lives, but our families, our communities.
Wait, say more about that. Communities. That feels kind of huge, abstract even.
Right. It's like, how much control do we really have,
Yeah.
right? But they're talking about these larger forces that shape our world. Access to education, healthcare, job security, all these things can actually create an environment where mental health either thrives or struggles.
Wow. So it's not just about fixing something within ourselves. It's about understanding the context we're living in too.
Exactly. And speaking of context, let's talk about all the different ways mental health challenges can show up. One thing that kind of blew my mind in that Healthline article, they cited almost 300 conditions listed in the DSM-5.
300. Okay, for those of us who aren't therapists, what is the DSM-5 and why should we care?
So the DSM-5, that's like the official guidebook, the rule book that mental health professionals use. It stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Basically, it helps them diagnose and classify all these different mental illnesses.
Okay, so it's for the pros. Got it.
Exactly. Before you go down the rabbit hole of
Oh,
self-diagnosis.
believe me, I've been there.
Right. We all have at some point, but it's really important to remember that this is a tool for trained professionals, not for us to use at home. Self-diagnosing can be not only inaccurate, but also, not great for your mental health in general.
Makes sense. So 300 conditions is a lot. Where do we even start? Anxiety and depression got to be up there, right?
You're absolutely right. Those are two of the most common mental health challenges globally. And get this, the World Health Organization estimates that almost 1 billion people worldwide experience a mental health condition each year.
Wow. 1 billion? Okay, that puts it into perspective. So anxiety, what are we talking about when we say anxiety disorder?
Well, the WHO describes it as having this excessive fear and worry that starts to get in the way of your everyday life. And that can look different for everyone.
Okay, so not just your typical, oh, I have a deadline stress.
Right. We're talking about those feelings of fear and worry becoming so intense and so constant that they really start to impact your life. Your relationships, your job, everything. Maybe you're constantly on edge, or you're having trouble sleeping, or you avoid social situations because of these anxious thoughts.
And that's where, I imagine, therapy comes in, to help you understand those feelings and develop those healthy coping mechanisms.
Absolutely. And same with depression. Both Healthline and the WHO, they talk about this feeling of sadness, this hopelessness that just completely takes over.
I think a lot of people struggle with understanding the difference between, just feeling sad, which is a normal part of life, versus, like, clinical depression. Is there a simple way to explain that difference?
Yeah, that's a great point. We all experience sadness, disappointment, even grief. Those are all normal human emotions, right? But with depression, those feelings, they stick around. It's like this heavy weight that you can't seem to shake off, and it makes it so hard to find joy in anything, even in things you used to love.
I think it's also important to remember that these things, they exist on a spectrum, just like mental health itself. So not everyone is going to experience anxiety or depression in the exact same way.
Yep. Exactly. And that's another reason why getting a professional diagnosis is so important. We can't just rely on Google or compare ourselves to others because everyone's experience is going to be unique.
Okay, so we've talked about anxiety, depression. What about bipolar disorder? That's one that I think there's a lot of confusion around.
Definitely. People often confuse bipolar disorder with just having, mood swings, but it's way more complex than that. The World Health Organization explains it as these really intense shifts in your mood and energy levels, from extreme highs, like really high highs, to really low lows.
And those highs and lows, we're not talking about just having a good day or a bad day.
Exactly. We're talking about these really intense periods of either feeling like you're on top of the world, like you can do anything, and then on the flip side, feeling so down that you can barely get out of bed. And these cycles can last for days, weeks, even months.
That sounds incredibly disruptive.
It's incredibly challenging, for sure. And it highlights why it's so important to understand that mental health isn't one size fits all.
Right, these experiences can be so incredibly unique.
They are, and I think that's something important to remember as we talk about PTSD as well.
Yes, PTSD, such a heavy one. It's often associated with, like, war or some kind of violent experience. And while the WHO report does highlight its prevalence in those settings, it's crucial to remember that trauma, unfortunately, can come from a lot of different places, and it can affect anyone.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be this huge dramatic event either. It's the person's response to a traumatic event, no matter how big or small, that really matters.
It really makes you think about how we define trauma and how those definitions can vary so much from person to person.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that idea of the spectrum, right? Trauma is not one size fits all. There's no right or wrong way to experience it.
So how do we even begin to process and heal from these experiences, especially when just the word itself, trauma, can feel so heavy and so personal?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's one we'll definitely be diving into more as we continue. But first, I think we need a quick break. When we come back, we'll shift gears a bit and talk about some practical tips for taking care of your mental well-being, no matter where you fall on that spectrum of mental health.
All right, so we're back and ready to shift gears a bit. We've talked about what the complexities of mental health, the different ways it can show up, but now I want to talk about the so what. Like, what do we do with all this information?
Right, because knowledge is great, but it's the action that really makes a difference.
Exactly. So where do we even begin?
Well, I think it's got to start with self-care. Remember that NIMH article, Caring for Your Mental Health? They had some really great practical tips in there.
Oh, right. Like exercise, eat your veggies, get enough sleep, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. But here's the thing. They sound simple, maybe even a little cliche, but they really do work. Even small changes in those areas can make a huge difference for your mental health.
You know what? I'm going to confess something here. Of all the self-care tips out there, the sleep one always gets me. I am the queen of late-night scrolling. The NIMH mentions blue light being a problem, and yeah, guilty as charged.
Oh, tell me about it. It's
Yeah.
so hard to resist that pull, right? I find it helps to reframe it, though. Like, instead of thinking about what I'm missing out on by putting my phone down, I try to focus on the fact that I'm actually giving myself the gift of a good night's sleep.
I love that. It's a mindset shift.
Totally. And it's a good reminder that self-care isn't selfish, It's about filling up your own cup so you can show up for the people you care about.
And sometimes showing up for yourself means knowing when to ask for help. I really appreciated how the WHO talked about the importance of social support. We don't have to do this alone.
100%. Whether it's a friend, a family member, a therapist, a support group, connecting with others can be so powerful. Sometimes just sharing your experiences, even the tough ones, can be incredibly healing.
So true. Speaking of healing, I think this is a good time to talk about recognizing those signs that it might be time to seek professional help.
It's not always easy, but it's so important. Thankfully, then NIH, they give us some pretty clear warning signs to watch out for.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so things like having trouble sleeping, changes in your appetite, eating more or less than usual, losing interest in things you used to enjoy.
Feeling on edge all the time, maybe withdrawing from your friends and family.
Yeah, all of that. Even unexplained aches and pains can be a sign that something's off.
See, that's what gets me, is how connected our minds and bodies really are. We often think of them as separate, but all those warning signs, they show just how much overlap there really is.
It's all connected. And I think that's a good reminder that taking care of our mental health isn't just about meditating more or whatever. It's about looking at the whole picture.
Yeah.
Our physical health, our relationships, our environment, it's all connected.
Totally. So, if you're listening to this and some of those warning signs are resonating with you, please know you are not alone. It's okay to not be okay, and asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
1,000%. And you might be thinking, okay, I'm ready to reach out for help, but like, where do I even start? It can feel overwhelming.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially if you've never seen a therapist or anything like that.
Well, the good news is you don't have to be a mental health expert to navigate this. A great place to start is actually your primary care doctor.
Really? They can help with this stuff.
Absolutely. They can assess your overall health, maybe even rule out any underlying medical conditions that could be contributing to how you're feeling.
Oh, interesting. So sometimes what we think is a mental health issue could actually be something physical going on.
It happens all the time. Remember, the mind and body, they're constantly talking to each other, so it's important to rule out anything physical first.
That makes sense.
And then from there, your doctor can be a great resource for connecting you with mental health professionals in your area.
Okay, so they're like a mental health matchmaker. I like it.
Exactly. They can help you find a therapist, counselor, psychiatrist, whoever might be the best fit for you.
Because just like with physical health, there are so many different approaches to mental health care.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely dive into those different approaches more after the break. But before we go there, I want to take a minute to talk about crisis resources.
Crisis resources. Okay, so we're talking about when someone is like in immediate danger.
Exactly. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, and by crisis I mean having thoughts of harming yourself or others, or if you just feel like you're in immediate danger, please reach out for help right away. Don't wait.
These are serious situations, but it's so important to remember that you don't have to go through this alone. There is help and there is hope.
Absolutely. In the U.S., you can call or text 988. That's the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, 988. And it's not just for suicide prevention either. They're equipped to handle all sorts of mental health crises 24/7.
And there's no shame in reaching out, ever. It takes a lot of strength and courage to ask for help when you need it.
It really does. And sometimes even knowing that those resources are there if you need them can be really helpful, like having a safety net, even if you never have to use it.
I love that. It does take the pressure off.
Huh?
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on mental health, I think what's standing out to me is just how connected everything really is. We've talked about how our mental health is impacted by our environment, our relationships, even these larger systems we're a part of.
Right, all these things working together.
It really makes you think differently about what it means to take care of your mental health.
It's bigger than just us, right? It's about our families, our communities. It really makes you think about the kind of world we're creating.
Absolutely. So as we're wrapping up, I think a good place to leave it is with that idea of the mental health spectrum we talked about. Where do you feel like you fall on that spectrum today? And it's not about labeling yourself or comparing yourself to others. It's just about checking in.
Exactly. Just a little self-reflection. How are you feeling? What's one small step you could take today to move a little bit closer to that place of well-being?
I love that. Small steps. You don't have to climb a mountain today. So we covered a lot today, from understanding what mental health really is to exploring common conditions, learning how to take care of ourselves, and knowing when to reach out for help. Hopefully you're walking away feeling informed, maybe even a little empowered.
It's been great diving into these articles with you.
Always a good time. And remember, taking care of your mental health, it's a journey. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up for yourself every single day. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.